Well, I wonder if you have experienced any changes this week. I wonder if you were at a graduation, maybe. Or maybe you attended a funeral or a wedding. Maybe you had your last day of school before summer vacation. Or maybe, to broaden it out just a little bit further than just last week, maybe you are at the start of a retirement, or you are closing some other chapter. I could do a shout out to a few Trinity grads who have been celebrating this week. I know we also had a funeral here on Friday. This week we said goodbye to Penny Carpenter, who retired from Portage Ukrainian Nursery School. It will be very strange to not have her somewhere in the Trinity building as life goes on. So there have been changes here, and no doubt you have changes you might list from your own life, from your family, from your circle. June tends to be a time for transitions, when there are more than usual opportunities for letting go and saying goodbye. And even when these opportunities are happy ones, changes can be hard on the heart. Grief comes with every change. I wonder if that's why you see so many tears at weddings and at graduations. So as I think about all of the changes that June presents, I'm wondering what grief you're carrying with you today. What are the losses that you are feeling? What things or stages or even people are you in the process of letting go? In today's Bible story, we find Elisha dealing with this journey of letting go. I don't know how familiar you are with Elijah and Elisha. Elijah is known as a fairly major prophet in the Jewish tradition, and he was Elisha's mentor. So Elisha was the student, the follower. Everything he knew, he'd learned from Elijah. And when it came to near the end of Elijah's life, Elijah set off toward his future with God and said quite plainly to Elisha that he needed to stay behind. This was the path that Elijah would be taking on his own. But Elisha, like many of us, not so good at the letting go. And every time Elijah said, "Okay, this is where I leave you," Elisha protested and said, "No, I'm never leaving you. I'm coming with you wherever you go." And more than once, people try to intervene with Elisha and say, do you get what is happening here? It's time to say goodbye. And Elisha says, "Don't talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about it." And sure, denial is a coping strategy that many of us employ in that journey of letting go, isn't it? Don't make me think about it. And it can help us get through the day if we just pretend that our loss isn't going to change the world as we know it. But denial can only last so long. And finally, Elijah and Elisha find themselves crossing the Jordan River, which in biblical terms is really always about something very transformative. You can think about the ways that that image has been picked up through religious tradition, over time, over music. It depicts all kinds of crossings over. Well, this is where Elijah and Elisha have their kind of final conversation, where Elisha says, "Okay, I can't do this without you. If you have to go, can you bless me with a double portion of your spirit? I'm going to need all the help I can get and more. If you insist on leaving me, I need help." All of that language of desperation that is in our hearts when we're letting go of someone we love. And Elijah says, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. That's kind of in God's department, maybe. But I got to go. And Elijah is taken up in a whirlwind, which we might imagine is awesome or traumatic, or probably both. And we could spend a little bit of time thinking about why the story of Elijah's death doesn't have him actually die. This is the same Elijah who the disciples later will talk about seeing with Jesus up on a mountaintop. It's the same Elijah who is reserved a seat for at Passover tables, like still today. He was imagined as the one who might return to introduce the Messiah. So there's reasons that the story needed Elijah not to actually physically die. And while that version of Elijah's ending may have provided some comfort to those who were uncomfortable with the idea of his mortality, for Elisha, the result is completely the same. Elijah is gone. And if you've seen any of those Twister movies, I'm not sure there would be any comfort at all in seeing your loved one being swallowed up by a tornado. So for Elisha, this is not good. And Elisha, who didn't follow Elijah's life or advice to stay back with the people, with the friends and the loved ones who could comfort him, no. So now we have Elisha who has watched this and now is left alone. There's a story about a famous preacher who was a bit of a fraud because the sermons were fantastic, but no one ever realized that in fact they'd all been written by the staff assistant. Or I think if we were to modernize this tale, we'd say AI. Anyway, finally, but in this part wouldn't be as good, because finally the assistant's patience ran out. And one day the preacher was speaking to thousands of expectant listeners, and at the bottom of page 2 read the stirring words, "And this, my friends, takes us to the very heart of the book of Habakkuk, which is," only to turn to page 3 and see nothing but the dreaded words, "You're on your own now." Oops. But isn't this exactly the point for us through all of our transitions? Our grief comes as we change course, shift directions, and fear somewhere deep inside that indeed, as these changes happen, we will find ourselves on our own now. This is the moment of sorrow. It's the moment of panic. It's the moment of despair. It's the 3 a.m. dark night of the soul. This is the part of Elisha's story where he is staring up into the sky, he is crying out, and even it says tearing his own clothes. He's on his own now. The story doesn't say how long Elisha stays there. And so I think it's misleading. You know, we just keep reading and the story continues. And we can't know this, but I rather suspect that Elisha was there for much longer than the story would have us believe. But getting back up after loss is hard. And it takes time. And it does us no good to pretend that it is simple or that it is easy or that it's not a hard thing. It reminds me, I found a children's book called After the Fall by Dan Santat. And it is an imaginative look at what might have happened to Humpty Dumpty after his fall off the wall. And along with the physical injuries to his shell, it turns out Humpty Dumpty has some emotional scars. He's afraid of heights. While he used to love finding a spot up off the ground where he could sit on a wall and watch and listen to the birds, he instead starts to live a diminished sort of existence. Exactly, Nelina, diminished sort of existence, where he starts to imagine, trapped by his fear about the worst things that can and do happen. And for a while, the fall off the wall becomes the defining moment of his life. Now, we may not be eggs, but I think we can be just as fragile. And transitions take their toll on us. In Sandat's kids' book, Humpty does eventually figure out how to get back up again, but it's a process. And I think that must have been true for Elisha too, although we don't hear anything about it, too bad. We don't know how long Elisha sits there in his grief. What we know is that eventually he does get back up again. And he picks up Elijah's mantle and heads back towards the river. And then, almost as if to test out his fear about whether he really is on his own or not, he shouts into the air and into the wind and says, "All right, where is the God of Elijah? Where are you, God?" And then he does what he watched his teacher do. Takes the mantle and he strikes the water, just as it had been done before. And what do you know? Just like last time, the water parts so he can cross back over to where his life is, where his people still are. For most of us, the getting back up and the moving forward again is not nearly as dramatic. Although I'm not sure there are any fewer miracles in it. We make the choice to take one step at a time into the future, whatever it looks like. We trust that in fact we're not going to be left all on our own, even if we are fearing that very thing. Remember that no one has a complete or altogether life. No one. Everyone suffers loss and pain and doubt. No one has the corner on virtue, no matter what they might have you believe. And if we forget that, then maybe we will be too overwhelmed by the greatness of those from the past. And we might not want to pick up that mantle and try to carry on. If we forget, we might be doomed to repeat our mistakes and the mistakes of generations past. But Elisha is not really considered a major prophet in any faith tradition. Interestingly, even though he's not nearly as famous as his teacher Elijah, he actually performed twice as many miracles as Elijah did. And while it was it's much quieter and a much less dramatic kind of ministry, his life is characterized by all kinds of healing and kindness and care. That's the kind of miracles that show up when Elisha is around. And I don't know what you think, but I think that's a pretty honorable legacy. So then, here we are in the transitions of June. In the midst of all these endings, do you just need to sit here for a while? If so, that's okay. You can sit with Elisha. God will sit with you too. You don't need to worry that you are on your own now. There is an invisible string there. It won't be broken. But perhaps, you are thinking you are ready to take a step forward. I wonder if there is a mantle that is waiting for you to pick it up. Whether you are the one who is leaving or the one who is left behind, how can you embrace tomorrow or next week? Is there a calling with your name attached? Doesn't have to be dramatic. Doesn't have to be big. But here too, we trust that we are not left all on our own. There are invisible strings just waiting to pull you in some direction. So I wonder what crossings you are willing to take today. I wonder who's waiting for you on the other side. I don't know. We cannot know. That's the thing about change. We go where we don't know. But it's also the thing about faith. We go where we don't know, one step at a time. So are you ready? Let's go. May God bless the paths before us. Amen.